What started off as an idea for a menu of how to present like French produce kind of became a radical restructure and started working in this model we call farm to bar, farm to glass. My name is Barney O'Kane and I'm here in Little Red Door, the wonderful little bar I work in Paris, France. Well, COVID was pretty impactful for our industry, as I'm sure it was all industries around the world. Here in France, our first lockdown was 2 months. I think the sort of same as everyone. We had like a hard, strict lockdown. And then in France, we had like almost our second and third, we call confinement, almost blended into each other. So we had 8 months of when certain places were allowed to open, but bars weren't. So essentially, we found ourselves having a business that had been incredibly busy, a bar full every day for 8 years, suddenly having 8 months to do nothing and just to think. So we decided to kind of make what started off as an idea for a menu of how to present like French produce kind of became a radical restructure in how we actually think our day to day. It's how we sort of started working in this model we call farm to bar, farm to glass. It was a way that we were looking towards going to in like small steps. And I think the pandemic sort of propelled us into it, but also, like, to give a best example, we were looking at just using 10 produce from 10 amazing producers and that forming the menu. And we were kind of looking at ourselves going, well, okay, if we have these tomatoes that are growing a few metro stops away and we use that to make a drink, isn't it a bit weird if we were to still have limes in the bar anyway because someone wants a daiquiri, or is it strange to still import mezcal from all around the world? On the basis, you don't think it's actually strange to have these ingredients and to have these things because most bars in the world have them, but actually taking time to pause and think and go, does this actually make sense? Do we need to cater to every drink style and every sort of drink environment, or how much are we able to push what we want to do through the menu? And it was simply from looking at the numbers. We do around 400, 450 drinks a night. And if we're able to control what goes into that drinks, and also if we're able to control as a bar, as a business, what we actually spend our money on, we choose to spend most of that money on small farms and producers. It's one step we can actually have to help impact the same people around us in our ecosystem, is kind of what we call it. It did indeed. Well, to be honest, we were very, very happy. We've been in the short list for the best menu for so many years now. I think we were kind of expecting not to win it. We're always happy to be nominated. Of course, we're very, very, very happy we won. It was the bar's first place, so it was very special. But I guess it was, of course, everyone's always very happy to win an award. But the fact that we got the award for that menu that sort of defined our first step into an approach that we preach so much about day to day, it was a very solidifying moment. It was a very nice pat on the back, so to say. It was a very, very nice feeling, I can't lie. So I mean, often I think a good example is it's changed a lot the way we make drinks. It kind of works in like a two-step process rather than just having an idea for a drink and making a drink. One team of ours will actually be working at the lab, and their first role before we even try and make a drink is to take the produce that we source, whether it be beetroots, olives, whatever it happens to be that we're working with, and they'll turn that into a product like a soda, a spirit, a fortified wine, a mezcal. Doesn't really matter. Whatever we feel is the best product that gets across the nuance of that produce, but also helps tell the story of that producer. And then once we have that product, that actual physical thing made, then we use that to make our drinks. So in a way, for me, I always feel there's like a simple beauty to them. Where, for example, we have a drink on the menu, it's very delicious with French saffron. But saffron's a very intense flavor, and people go, the drink's called saffron, the main ingredient is saffron. And then if a guest asks, I don't like saffron, should I try it? You kind of have to go, probably not. If you want to try it, I will change it if you don't like it. But, there's a very clear sort of fine line to how we actually do everything. Most of the difficult technical parts all happens behind the scenes in the sourcing, but they're quite direct, I think if you imagine if you're having a drink called olive, you would like it to taste like olives. And then what we try and do is really highlight the nuances of that specific variety of olives. So yeah, it's very, very different from how we would have worked in the past. Sometimes to an extent. I think that's a very interesting question, because I think a really important caveat to mention is whenever we're giving our sort of workshops or lectures about what we do like to point out that we're in a very privileged position. One, that we're in France in terms of all of our staff during the pandemic got quite a lot of support. And also France is a fantastic growing nation. So also we have from the north, when you have Normandy and Brittany, all the way south to whereas you have the Mediterranean, there's actually an amazing variety of what grows here and what you would traditionally need to make cocktails or recognizable style of drinks. I think the main thing is the planning. I wouldn't necessarily say it takes a rich bar, but I think the most difficult thing, like you say, is actually the planning. Whereas if you just source, I always use the example of whiskey. If you source a Scotch whiskey from a supplier, you place an order, you know what day and roughly between what time window that whiskey will arrive. Then you have your whiskey, you can make your whiskey drinks. If you're working with a red kiwi farmer and he's the only person who grows red kiwis in Europe, if the season is 3.5 weeks late, there's nothing you can do to counteract that. You have to wait 3.5 weeks for the kiwi and then staff the business so that you can have more hands on deck to ultimately process and deal with those red kiwis when they're finally ripe and finally arrive. Now we're getting to the point where we're actually starting to think longer term and further ahead, as we have such long-term relationships of all of the producers in mind that we can know what will be growing in 1 to 2 years, and we can start to plan ahead 2, 3, 4 years into the future of what we can grow and what we can do. But once we've gotten to this point after 2 years, it might maybe turn into a rich bars game in the extent of if you're taking 500 kilograms of plums and they're all ready at the same time, there's no negotiation. The plums aren't stable. You need the plums. You'll have to buy that half a ton of plums in one go. You ultimately see the returns on that when 6 months down the line, that plum Amaro, that plum Aneshi, whatever you happen to have made with the plums, you start to make drinks with that and you don't have to reorder anything because we control that. We have made all of the plums for it. So it's a very different way of working. It doesn't have to be a rich person's game, but it depends how big you want to do it or how far you want to do it. I think now you start to hear farm to glass and farm to bar cocktails come up and be used quite a lot. I certainly know people give me a lot of references for bars on the west coast of America who work like that. And it's probably maybe different from what we think of when we say farm to glass. What we mean is because we take such large volumes to make alcohols or whatever we happen to be making, it means that we can promise these people, we will take as much of your product as you have and as much as you want to sell us. Whereas sometimes, especially in the restaurant world, when you eat in a farm to restaurant experience, often what you'll be consuming is garnishes and decorations and small micro herbs, the finishing touches, but the actual produce forms the core liquid. I think about roughly 70% of what we sell in the bar is a product in our liquid that we've made by our own hands from people we know, well, from hands we know, essentially. There's no better way to put it. that's the sort of conversation that we call it the mezcal conundrum. So it's on the first drink, on the first menu, Grounded, there was it was a tomato drink. So we're making a tomato vine eau de vie, where we were distilling the vine and using the clarified juice to water down the distillate to kind of use all of the tomato. And we were looking at the drink, and there's mezcal was working really well with it. And then we kind of said, well, what is there much point in if we source these tomatoes from this cooperative, we use all of the tomatoes to make this drink, and then we just buy mezcal. We have no control over how the mezcal is made, how sustainable it is. We have no control over how it's shipped here. So I think mezcal is the best example because every bar kind of has to have it because everyone wants to drink it. Whereas now we've started a process of working with small mezcal producers who we know we help carbon offset the delivery. The mezcal all gets sailed over by boat. We know that these guys, they have a fantastic gender balance within their team. We know that they help giving people employment who have been deported from the United States. So then we go, okay, having mezcal in the bar, is it evil or no-go? There are just creative ways in which you can get mezcal and bring it into your bar. And we're very lucky that a lot of the people outside of the business we work with are very reactive and very keen to work in this way. So now we can have projects where we know we have mezcal sailing all the way from Mexico to France. We could age that mezcal on the boat if we wanted. We have a time frame where we can do more interesting things. So I think it's just important you could look at that as a problem, but you can look at that as not only a solution, but an actual path to find much more interesting things. Whereas I know if I was in a bar around the world and they had sailed over a spirit by sea and that had been aged on the boat for 6 months, I would absolutely always want to drink that. But it's sort of a wider approach we have. We don't have any pisco and cachaça in the bar, and that doesn't mean the bar will never have, or we don't see value in this produce. We just haven't found a way in which we can get it in a way that sort of meets our criteria, meets our need. But with rum, this is also France, we have rum agricole. With pisco, again, this is also France. It's a country that's known for growing grapes. We can find grape spirits and grape distillates closer to home that we can use instead of pisco. And it's actually quite encouraging, and we find it ourselves quite rewarding to begin to think this way. I also think we've seen within the team, even though they've been here for 2 months or for 2 years at this point, it gives also our team this sort of, I don't want to say knowledge, but it gives us this sort of mindset that we can often be more critical of what brands are saying, we can be critical of what's presented to us, and it helps us just really, anytime we address a problem or a solution or difficulties in the supply chain, we get to kind of think with our mindset and go, okay, what is the best way to do this, or should we do this? It's just it's a very rewarding way of working. I think having 8 months to do nothing was absolutely an advantage. Like I say, whenever Alex or myself, we talk about it, we often talk about a lot of the mistakes we made along the way and a lot of the uphill battle, because there's not really a textbook for how to be a farm to glass bar. And no way am I saying that we're writing one or able to write one, but it was us going, oh, this is a good idea, we can buy all of their tomatoes. And then if a farm phones you and says, hey, all of these other restaurants cancelled our orders because they feel they're going to close, do you want to take them? We said yes. We quickly were just found ourselves surrounded by produce and having no space to prep it, that now we actually need an outside lab space just to facilitate what we do. I think having the 8 months was what we needed to actually step away from the business being so demanding day to day. And then we've needed just every spare moment we've had to really kind of streamline and fine line and pursue what we're doing to kind of fit a model in which we're happy and we can see how we can grow from. I really like that question. I would I would like to think it could change the game. The game doesn't have to change completely. Like I say, just because a bar outside of Mexico has mezcal doesn't mean it's a bad bar. Just because a bar might have limes and they're not from a lime-growing country doesn't mean they're a bad bar either. But I think every step along the way, there's steps that we can all have to sort of create a much fairer and much more sustainable future. Where we always say, if you're working hospitality and you're able to make a drink on a menu, just taking one ingredient and working out where you get it from and where you source it from, that's one step. The entire bar program doesn't have to be farm to bar. It doesn't have to be completely sustainable, but if you start making that one step in the future, it's going to get better and it's going to be better. The difficulty is with such an international world, which is a crazy thing to say, but every different country has different regulations on produce, has different regulations on farming, have different regulations on recycling, composting. It's certainly something that I see a lot of merit in, not only for bars and restaurants, but also for guests and consumers. We imagine if anyone, tourist industry, people travel around the world to eat and drink what is grown locally, while at the same time people also have a lot of pride in what is grown and what comes from their area. So I think getting to take from what's around you, from people growing in nice ways, and just presenting that and being proud of that, I think that's a very human side of looking at it that everyone can get behind. No, so we don't work with any brand deals. We kind of have no big brands within the menu, and that's not a exorcism or a red flag against big brands, because we talk so much about small producers, but for us that also includes small distillers, small breweries, small winemakers. I think globally we're in a position, if there was to be another pandemic, the giant alcohol companies that have multiple wings, they'll be okay, they'll survive. If anything, they might do better because everyone will have to drink at home. But it's the small people who have been making a Calvados for 5 generations. Well, also I see someone who's been growing walnuts for 5 generations as an equally important part of a country's history as someone who's been making alcohol for 5 generations. But they're the people who are really trouble of disappearing or losing what they do due to the pandemic. So most of the menu is comprised of smaller brands that fit a similar ethos to us. We work a lot with quite a few big brands, but in ways that again work for us, but more on sort of external events outside of the menu. We don't take any listings to be on the menu, but we're open to doing events, collaborations, as long as it fits our ethos. We very much stress for big brands that actually visiting the producers wherever we're going, wherever we're doing an activation, that's who we are and that's what we see value in, and that's what we're here to do. And it's the same as well in Paris. We've done a few series of events, pop-ups, series takeovers, but we were allowed to control the narrative, and we're very thankful when the brands allow us to work that way alongside them. Because ultimately, I think it gives a very clear message of what we want to do, but also it's a good message for the brand to be able to shout about as well. So I think that the main thing with Grounded to flourish that will soon be into Evergreen is going to be the third in the trilogy. It's the first time in the bar's 10-year history where we haven't changed the concept, the theme, and the philosophy between menus. It's just a further sort of deep dive into our approach, where I guess we sort of learned how to do everything better. We're still learning how to do everything more efficiently. Because of this sort of farm to glass model, we've pretty much changed the entire structure of the bar day to day. Because we have more staff, we have an entirely different production site where we make everything. And Flourish is just sort of our deep dive into what we want to do more and how we think it can be done better. And then now we're starting to implement the sort of farm to glass vision into our house classics, into our classic program. And it's more of like a solidification of this is who we are and this is who we want to be and this is what we're going to keep doing. As I don't think Little Red Door will ever stop being farm to bar now. I know we certainly don't plan to, and I think now we've found what we are, and we're just going to keep pushing that as far as we can go. There is, absolutely. I think that for me is definitely having the balance between the guest experience and being what we want to be is quite difficult. I think it's a problem that bars face a lot more than restaurants. For example, no one will go to a sushi restaurant and want a burger. It's a crude analogy, but it's true. But in bars, people have this habit of, I know what I like to drink, so I'll have that, you know. People might order a Negroni in a tiki bar or a tiki drink in a dive bar, or however people choose to drink. And I think it's just the mentality of drink consumption is quite different. And of course, it's hospitality at the end of the day. We like to say all of this seriousness and all of the actual deep thinking comes before service. And as soon as the door opens, it's hospitality. We're still there to look after people, make sure they have a good night, make sure they leave happy. And you want to do that in the right way. Like I say, we never want to point out that someone wants to drink a daiquiri in France. You know what I mean? Like you never want to make people feel bad for their choices. What we make sure we do is we have an alternative for something we think people will want that we're happy with. But often as well, if people want a drink or if they ask for something and we go, oh, I'm really sorry that it doesn't grow here or it's not in season at the moment. I don't have anything similar, but I do have this other thing that sounds like you might like. You know, we always have to kind of be ready for recommendations. We never want to make people feel like they're having our plan B. The more we kind of make people prepared for it, the better. Like, for example, coconut is a really good one. Coconuts don't grow in France, but what we can do have is plenty of fig trees. So we use fig leaves to make fig leaf sodas, fig leaf cordials, fig leaf spirits. That's what we kind of use to replace coconut. We call it coconut sometimes. And often people are more interested and more intrigued if they wanted a coconut drink and what we have to offer is fig leaf. That's sort of creating a unique experience because then they go, cool, I can have fig leaves next time I want coconut. It's about creating an experience that's different, enjoyable, and memorable at the same time. I think for us, it's very important to speak about what we're doing and what we're trying to do internationally. Of course, we're in quite a lucky position. We get to be a bar that's quite well known around the world. Well, thanks to our menus, thanks to awards like Tales of the Cocktail and 50 Best, which is certainly a big privilege. And when we get to travel, it's why we also push so much on the brands we're working with for travel. It's amazing that in this niche of bars, we get to travel and voyage all around the world. But when we travel, we want to see the farms. We want to learn how things are growing there. We want to learn how people eat and drink. We want to learn how people react to the seasons. We want to learn how people preserve food, preserve produce. And then also for us, we think it's quite nice that we can come to, let's say, Cape Town. And by the time we're doing the two events, we'd been in 5 different farms in all different regions of Cape Town. Not that we were experts on Cape Town after the 5 days, but I think it puts a lot more value. And actually, we've been foraging in mountains for 2 days. We've been on urban farms in the city. We went and got this kelp ourselves out from Miller's Point. I think it makes everything a lot more real. I think people can see the sort of effort and care that we put into what we try and put out there. But yes, for us, certainly shouting about our message, it's something we feel very strongly about. We just hope that we're doing it in the right, friendly, optimistic way. I think if any bar wants to start their own farm to glass journey, the best piece of advice, and you can do this whether you're a bar manager, a bar owner, a bartender, take anything you're responsible for, take anything you have coming into the bar day to day, go, okay, cool, where is this coming from? Do I know somewhere better I could source it from? Do I know someone growing this? Can I ask someone who might know? And so most bars around the world have olives as snacks. Find someone near you growing olives, or if there are no olives growing near you, research into sustainable olive farms. It's same as well for citrus. If you have local citrus fruit, try and see if you can start using them instead of your lemons or your limes. Or if you're in a wine growing country, look at the winemakers making verjus, like young sour grape juice. It's beautiful for drinks. I'd say start small, take control over something that's actually in your power to be in control of, because that's the thing, it will make a difference. If you need beetroots for one drink and you can source beetroots from one farm, that will make a difference. Those beetroots might not make a difference to a giant fresh produce exporter, but to one small family growing beetroots, that will make the difference. That's the important thing. You see the actual human impact of making these decisions. As a bar, as a business, you can see where you spend your money, and I think that's the most important power that any brand or any bar or any business owner can actually have. I think we just off conversations you and I even had ourselves, I think it's one thing to be important of is if people are trying to make the right steps, whether it's for sustainability, whether it's to look after people in their environment, I think if people are making any decision but with the right mentality and the right attitude, it's important to celebrate that. And then also, the more we share what we do and what we think works, the easier it is for everyone to sort of adopt this approach. I think in recent years, sustainability can sort of be a dirty word, trigger word. People can be accused of greenwashing. And I'm sure there are certainly people out there saying sustainable because it's marketing and it's hip. But that shouldn't necessarily be a bad thing. The fact 10 years ago, no one was talking about straws, recycled plastics. We're moving in a very, very good direction, but also because we have to move in that direction. I think the main thing is if someone is around you and they're trying, it's important to actually celebrate that and commend that. If more people start taking smaller and smaller steps to doing the right thing, we'll start to see that impact and that effort reflected on a much more global scale. So it's something I hope that we're able to see in the next coming years in a big, big way. No, it was a pleasure chatting as always. You're very, very welcome. It's a delight to get to talk about what we do.